During the comics boom of the early 1990s, Malibu Comics launched a new line of titles set in a separate universe called the Ultraverse. This universe was dominated by superhero titles and was meant to compete with the two giants, Marvel and DC. To stand out among all the other superheroes of the time, the Ultraverse titles featured fancier paper and superior coloring techniques. They also boasted high-profile creator names like Mike W. Barr, Steve Englehart, and Barry Windsor Smith. One of the Ultraverse titles launched in 1993 was Sludge, written by Steve Gerber and penciled by Aaron Lopresti. In the first issue of Sludge, we meet a giant mass of blue, sludge, wandering around in the sewers of New York, confused about its current state of being. Meanwhile, there's a brutal drive-by shooting being committed right above him on the street. Sludge climbs up to the surface and proceeds to attack the assailants, smashing their car. As a response, they pump him full of lead, but that proves to be fruitless, as the blue heap of slime is immune to bullets. He thus rises up from his presumed demise and viciously kill all the criminals. During this fight, Sludge also discovers yet another of his powers. Anything that he touches is deformed. The substance that makes up his blue hide is toxic to organic matter and causes rapid and abnormal skin growth. Quite deadly if he touches someone's face, as the extra amount of skin will lead to suffocation. So is this the most original superpower ever? Certainly one of the freakiest and weirdest anyway. After this gang of hoods is dealt with, we get to know just how Sludge came to be. Once he was a cop named Frank Hoag. Frank was a crooked cop and did favors for mob boss John Paul Marcello, like tipping him off to a raid or turning a blind eye to drug deals. One day Marcello asked for a bigger favor though. He wanted Frank to kill somebody, and not just anybody, but a fellow cop. Frank refused, despite the fact the cop in question was also crooked, and far worse than Frank himself. Marcello didn't respond well to this, and ordered his men to kill Frank as a result. In the ensuing firefight, Frank fell into barrels containing some kind of blue chemical waste. The gangsters then riddled his body with bullets and threw it into the sewers. There, the presumably dead policeman Frank Hoag was reborn as Sludge. Makes no sense, I know. Classic comic origin. In the following issue, Sludge continues to stalk the sewers of New York, trying to get a grasp of his current condition. His body isn't the only thing that's been affected by the waste. His mind, too, as Frank has difficulties thinking straight and struggles to speak coherent sentences. He also sets out to get revenge on Marcello, cutting through the New York mob. Along the way, he runs into Lord Pumpkin, a bizarre gangster better known simply as Pump. This weird character peddles a new drug on the streets called Zook, which can have some pretty destructive effects on its users. Nevertheless, the drug is a big hit. Pump wants to use Sludge as a pawn in his underworld power plays, which the old heap of slime agrees to, on one condition, that Pump kills him later. You see, Frank wants to die. He can't stand living in his current state any longer, and there doesn't seem to be a cure in sight. However, so far nothing has been able to hurt him seriously, let alone kill him. But Lord Pumpkin appears to have this ability. Pump is in fact some kind of mystical being and has immense powers. When Sludge discovers this, he sees his way out. However, later his hand is injected with some Zook, and somehow the drug turns his hand normal. Frank now finally finds some hope that he can actually become human again. So he changes the deal with Pump. He no longer wants to be killed, but get as much Zook as possible to make himself wholly human. The Lord Pumpkin has no problem with this, and Sludge continues to act as his hired muscle. In the end though, Pump appears to die at the hands of an agent sent by his underworld enemies, and his entire headquarters blows up. Sludge manages to flee with a small sample of Zook and makes his way back to the sewers. There he consumes the drugs, and not long after, his condition greatly improves. He doesn't quite turn human, but something closer to it. His language and thoughts become clearer too, and he can finally operate on the surface among people. Getting in touch with reporter Shelley Rogers, whom he met earlier in the series, the two set out to discover the mystery behind Frank's transformation, and hopefully find a cure. Before they could really do that though, the series was cancelled at issue 12. The final issue doesn't deal with the main plot, but instead features a crossover between Sludge and another Ultraverse hero, Prime. By the mid-90s, the comics boom was over, and the entire industry instead found itself in a crisis. As such, Malibu cancelled all of its lower-selling Ultraverse titles. Sadly, Sludge was among them. It didn't really matter though, as the rest of them didn't have long to last anyway. Sludge did get a one-shot Christmas special after his series ended though, called Sludge Red Xmas. During his heyday, he also appeared in several other Ultraverse titles as a guest star. He even appeared in the short-lived cartoon show Ultraforce, based on a comic of the same name. yes, there was actually a cartoon featuring the Ultraverse characters. I wonder how many people remember that. I've personally never seen it, except for a few clips. I doubt it ever even aired in Sweden. Anyway, Ultraforce was a team consisting of the various bigger Ultraverse heroes, basically their version of the Avengers or the Justice League. Lord Pumpkin featured as one of the villains on the show, and Sludge appears to be one of his minions. I guess not too inaccurate from the comics. Anyway, in 1995, Marvel bought the struggling Malibu, and the first thing they did was cancel all of their titles. Marvel didn't actually care about the Malibu characters, they just wanted the company's superior coloring tech. They did try a half-hearted attempt at relaunching some of the more popular Ultraverse titles though, rebooting the entire universe in the process. They also did a few Marvel Ultraverse crossovers, but all of this was probably just for show, as by late 1996, there was essentially nothing left of the Malibu characters in the Marvel lineup. They were all gone, erased. Sludge never really appeared much at all during the Marvel era, his most notable role being a minor guest appearance in a couple of issues of Foxfire in early '96. This was also the very last appearance the character ever made, and we haven't seen him since. Marvel still owns Sludge though, as well as the rest of the Ultraverse, and if they wanted to, they could bring them all back at any time. So I guess it's almost a bit of a stretch to even call Sludge a superhero. After all, he spends most of his time trying to get killed by Lord Pumpkin or trying to get cured. He even does the mob's work for a while there while working for Pump. What kind of superhero becomes a hitman for the mob? Still though, he only kills other gangsters, and there are moments when he actually goes out to stop crime, although with very brutal methods. Spider-Man and the rest would certainly not approve. There is also a moment where Sludge tries to act like a real proper superhero. A boat suddenly explodes in the bay, and Sludge spots a sole survivor struggling to survive. He thus goes out into the water and rescues her. But of course, let's not forget that toxic touch of his. He did, and this is what happened. I guess it's not so strange he doesn't act more like a typical superhero. How can he save people when he can't even touch them? A really weird character for sure, but he was created by Steve Gerber, the man behind Howard the Duck and Ruby Thursday, so that's not so surprising. I wouldn't say the Sludge series is a straight-up comedy, but it does have a very offbeat tone. It's not really meant to be taken entirely serious. That doesn't mean it doesn't have engaging drama. The story of Frank Hoag is very tragic. You really feel sorry for this poor freak. He's so miserable, he just wants to die. Of course, it's all done in that sort of tongue-in-cheek Steve Gerber style, so it never gets truly depressing. I suppose you could say Sludge is a tragic comedy. That would be a pretty good description. A violent, gory, tragic comedy. There are some pretty messed up stuff in this series, so I wouldn't recommend it for kids. We got one character in particular who's very disturbing. A hitman called Bloodstorm. This guy has some serious mental issues. When he's not killing people for the mob, one of his activities is to hire hookers, but not to have sex with them, but to beat the crap out of them, all the while fantasizing he's beating on his bullies from childhood. Bloodstorm is a member of the Sludge Rogues Gallery, I suppose. Other members are of course Lord Pumpkin. If the series had continued, I'm sure Pump would have returned and probably have become Frank's nemesis. Pump did appear in a few other Ultraverse comics, and he even got his own one-shot special and a miniseries. I would love to cover Pump in Forgotten Supervillains, but sadly I'm unable to find some of these other appearances. Unfortunately, I can't order comics from the US any longer, as now not only do I have to pay giant shipping fees, but also giant customs fees. Until I can get them somehow and read them, I can't make that video. I know, it sucks. Anyway, among the other rogues, we have a tragic Frankenstein's monster type character and a really strange crocodile entity that lives in the sewers. It talks, very eloquently in fact, claims to be a god, and eats people. Lord Pumpkin also had a kid sidekick named Pistol, who dressed like a 1930s gangster and talked like he was one too. He's just a kid, yet a vicious killer. Oh Steve, what were you smoking? I highly recommend the Sludge series, that is if you're not too young. I don't think it's ever been reprinted though, so you'll have to get your hands on the original issues. I don't know what's wrong with Marvel. The coloring technique doesn't even matter anymore anyway. It's obviously no longer in use. So basically they've got an entire universe of characters just sitting there on a shelf for no reason. At the very least, they could put all the old 90s stuff in trades. In fact, I would actually prefer that as opposed to news stories. The news stories would probably just suck anyway. Here's hoping we someday get a Sludge trade paperback, and hopefully also Lord Pumpkin. And as always, remember, Arkham Asylum awaits you in the next video.